Human, if you lose, you're my slave. If you win, you're my husband. The words echoed in Ethan Cole's mind long after the roar of the alien crowd faded from his ears. He stood in the open arena of Zareth Prime, the galaxy's largest warrior world. Above him, the sky was a strange shade of copper, and around him, thousands of alien eyes burned with curiosity. But none of them mattered as much as the single pair of eyes locked on him, Princess Kira's. She was the daughter of the High Warlord, the undefeated champion of her people. Tall, armored in a polished bronze-like metal, she looked both regal and dangerous. He knew she was feared by her enemies and adored by her people. Once she had been something else to him, too. A friend, months earlier, during a trade mission from Earth. Ethan had met Kyra on neutral ground. She had been different then, curious, questioning him about human history, and Earth's strange mix of strength and compassion. They had laughed, trained together, even shared stories of their childhoods. He thought they were building something rare, a connection that could cross like years. But then she was called back to Zareth. The messages she sent became less frequent, then stopped entirely. Ethan told himself it was politics, duty, war. But he still felt the distance, like a slow wound. He had wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but he didn't know how. Here they were again, only this time, separated not by distance, but by a dueling ground. Her challenge had come without warning. He had been brought before the royal court as a guest, only to hear her voice ring out, "Human, if you lose, you're my slave. If you win, you're my husband." The audience had erupted in cheers, taking it as a bold game. But to Ethan, it felt personal. The words carried weight, too much weight. Was she mocking him? Testing him? Or was this her way of saying something she couldn't in private? Ethan's heart was heavy. He had dreamed of seeing her again, but not like this. He wanted to talk, to understand why she had gone silent. But here, in this culture, words meant little compared to action. The rules were explained quickly. It would be a traditional Zareth duel. No killing blows, but the fight would continue until one fighter was unable to stand or yielded publicly. She would fight with her plasma spear. He would be given a short blade and a small shield. An unfair match, but that was how Zareth tradition tested worth. When the weapons were handed to him, Ethan's hands felt heavy. He wasn't a stranger to combat. He had trained with Earth's expeditionary forces before joining the diplomatic corps, but he was not here for war. Still, he knew this was more than a fight. This was about something deeper. The arena floor was made of pale stone, marked with burned scars from past battles. The crowd chanted Kyra's name. Ethan felt small in the sea of alien voices. The duel began with a blare of horns. Kira moved first, her spear flashing in the copper light. Her strikes were precise, but not lethal, as if she was studying him. Ethan blocked and sidestepped, using his smaller size to keep moving. His mind was a whirl. This was the first real conversation they'd had in months, and it was made of steel and sparks. "Why this, Kara?" he muttered between breaths, knowing she might not answer. She didn't speak, but her eyes met his briefly, and there was something there, not hatred, but an unreadable tension. As the minutes passed, Ethan began to adapt. He had no chance if he tried to overpower her, so he used his speed, dodging low, rolling away, forcing her to chase him. A few in the crowd laughed, others jeered, but he kept his focus. His thoughts wandered to their time together months ago. The way she had once asked him why humans fought so fiercely for those they loved. "Because we can't stand losing them," he had told her. Back then, it had made her smile. Now, it was the memory keeping him from giving up. She swept his legs with the spear's shaft, but he caught himself on one knee, blocking her next. Strike with his shield, The impact rattled his arm. She pressed forward, forcing him back toward the arena wall. He could yield. It would be easy. One word, and it would be over. But if he lost here, he would become her slave. More than that, he would have failed to show her the truth about humans. That distance didn't make us weaker. It made us fight harder to close the gap. So he didn't yield the next time she lunged. He sidestepped and used his shield to push. A spear away. It wasn't enough to win, but it gave him space. She tilted her head slightly, as if surprised. The fight continued, each moment a mix of strain and unspoken words. The crowd roared for blood, but Ethan fought not for victory alone. He fought to show her that the connection they had wasn't gone, even if she had pulled away. Finally, after a long exchange, the horn sounded again, marking the pause before the final round. Both of them were breathing hard. Kira looked at him, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "Fight me with all you have, Ethan. Show me why I shouldn't forget you." His chest tightened. This wasn't just a duel. It was the only language. She could speak here, the only way to bridge the distance. When the final horn blared, he raised his blade and stepped forward. He didn't know if he would win. He didn't know if this would heal the silence between them. But he knew one thing. Humans didn't run from those they cared about, no matter how far apart they had drifted. And so, with the copper sky above and the crowd screaming around them, Ethan met her eyes and answered in the only way she would. Understand by fighting on. Human, if you lose, you're my slave. If you win, you're my husband. The words were no longer just her challenge. They had become his hope. He copper light of Zareth's sun burned over the arena as the final round began. Ethan's hands tightened on his short blade and shield. His heart pounded, but not from fear, from the weight of everything unspoken between him and Kyra. The months of silence still echoed inside him. The way she had once been warm and curious, only to vanish into her duties. The unanswered messages. The distance that had grown like a wall between them. Now she stood across from him, spear in hand, armor gleaming, eyes locked on his. This duel was the only conversation they were allowed to have. Here, among her people, words would mean nothing. He had to speak through every movement, every strike, every choice to keep going. The horns blared, and Kyra moved first. Her spear flashed forward in a blur of energy. Ethan blocked with his shield, the impact sending a vibration up his arm. He stepped sideways, trying to stay out of her reach. Kyra pressed forward, her movements precise and controlled. She didn't waste a single step. To the crowd, she looked like a predator playing with prey. But Ethan could tell she was testing him, not just his skill, but his resolve. He remembered her voice from months ago, asking him, "Why do humans fight so hard for people who may never come back?" Back then, he'd told her, "Because there's always a chance they will." He held on to that now. Every time her spear came at him, he thought about that chance. The hope that this fight could be more than a spectacle, that it could be the bridge back to her. The crowd chanted her name, but some voices began to call his too. He noticed it in the corner of his hearing. Not many, but enough to matter. Kyra spun the spear low, sweeping toward his legs. Ethan jumped back, but his foot caught on the uneven stone. He stumbled, and in that instant, the spear's tip stopped, just short of his chest. She could have ended it right there. Instead, she pulled the spear back. "Get up, human," she said quietly, almost like she was giving him a chance. Ethan's pride burned, but so did something else, gratitude. She was still holding back. That meant she wanted to see more from him. He pushed himself to his feet. His mind raced. He couldn't match her reach, but maybe he could turn it into an advantage. Humans weren't the strongest in the galaxy, but they were adaptable. They learned. That was what made them dangerous, and what gave them hope even when the odds were impossible. The next time she thrust forward, he didn't step away. He stepped in. The move surprised her. He used his shield to shove the spear shaft sideways and closed the gap, swinging his short blade toward her shoulder. She twisted, and his strike glanced off her armor. But for the first time, she had to take a step back. The crowd gasped. Kyra single quotes S eyes narrowed. But there was a glimmer there now. Respect, maybe even approval. They circled each other. Ethan's breathing was hard, but he kept his stance steady. He knew she could overpower him at any moment. But that wasn't what this was about. This wasn't about proving he was stronger. It was about showing her that the bond they once had still meant something, that he was willing to fight for it, no matter how far apart they had drifted. She lunged again, faster this time, the spear striking in quick combinations. Ethan blocked one, dodged another, but the third caught his shield hard enough to knock it from his hand. It clattered across the stone floor. The crowd roared, unarmed on one side. The perfect ending for the champion. Kyra twirled the spear, preparing for the finishing blow. Ethan's pulse raced. This was the moment. Yield, and it was over. Fight, and maybe he'd still lose, but he'd lose trying. He stepped forward. Without the shield, he moved even faster. Her first strike passed, inches from his side. He ducked the second, rolling beneath her arm. As he came up behind her, he hooked the short blade under the edge of her armor, not to wound, but to tap, the Zareth signal for a point scored. The crowd went silent for a heartbeat. Kira turned her head slowly. She looked down at the blades. Position, then back at him. Ethan stepped back, lowering the weapon. The crowd's chanting had grown louder, shaking the air itself. The duel was in its final stages, but neither Ethan nor Kyra had slowed down. Every move they made sent sparks from metal striking metal. Every step echoed with meaning neither of them had spoken out loud. Ethan's body ached. His legs were heavy. His arms burned from holding the short blade, and sweat stung his eyes. But he refused to stop. Humans were not the strongest, but they were stubborn, and he knew that. Stubbornness was the only bridge left between him and Kira. For months, she had been far away, out of reach. He had thought about her every day, wondering if she even remembered the connection they once shared. Now, she was right in front of him, and every strike of her spear felt like the only language she understood. Kyra lunged at him again. He turned her strike aside with the flat of his blade, stepping inside her reach. For a moment, their faces were close. Her eyes were sharp, focused, but there was something behind them. Something softer. Something that reminded him of the Heing. Days when they would talk for hours without the weight of a crowd or a duel between them. "You've gotten stronger," she said between breaths. "So have you," he replied. "But I'm not here just to fight." She didn't answer. Instead, she spun away and struck again, the force rattling his weapon. It wasn't rejection. It was her way of telling him to prove what he meant. The fight dragged on. Ethan's legs began to feel unsteady, but every time his body told him to give up, his mind reminded him why he was here. Humans didn't let distance break them. He thought of home, of the oceans of Earth, the smell of rain, the warmth of the sun. All things he'd once told Kyra about. She had been fascinated, listening like every detail mattered. She had said once that humans were strange because they carried their homes with them in their hearts. Now, standing in the heart of Zareth's greatest arena, he understood something. That was why he could still feel close to her, even after months apart. Home wasn't just a place. Sometimes it was a person. Kyra struck low, and Ethan barely jumped aside. The crowd roared at the near hit. She pressed harder now, her movements sharper, faster. He blocked one strike, dodged another, but her spear grazed his arm, leaving a glowing line across the fabric of his uniform. The sting made his focus tighten. She wasn't holding back anymore, and that meant she was finally fighting him as an equal. He started using the environment, stepping onto the uneven stones, forcing her to adjust her stance, backing into the sun so its glare caught her eyes. For a second, shifting his movements to be unpredictable, Kyra's brows furrowed as she realized his tactic. She attacked with a burst of speed, but this time Ethan didn't retreat. He stepped inside her reach again, his blade tapping her armored chest. Another point scored. The crowd gasped. A human scoring twice against their undefeated champion. Kyra stepped back, breathing hard. She looked at him for a long moment, then gave a faint nod. It wasn't approval exactly. It was acknowledgement. You adapt quickly, she said. It's how we survive, Ethan answered. It's how we keep the people we care about close, even when they're far away. For just a heartbeat, her eyes softened. Then the moment was gone, and her stance shifted for the next attack. The duel continued, but something was different. Now, every strike from her carried more weight, more intent, and Ethan met each one with everything he had got by now. The entire arena was on its feet. Some shouted for Kyra to finish him. Others shouted for the human to keep fighting. The noise rolled over Ethan like a wave, but his focus stayed locked on her. When she struck high, he ducked. When she swept low, he jumped. When she spun the spear to disarm him, he caught the shaft in one hand, twisted, and pushed it away. Every move was harder now. His breathing was ragged, his muscles screamed, but he kept going. Because giving up meant more than losing the match. It meant letting the distance between them stay forever. Kyra struck again, and this time their weapons locked. The sound of metal grinding filled the air. Their faces were inches apart. "Why didn't you answer my messages?" he asked, voice low enough that only she could hear. Her grip tightened on the spear. "Because I didn't know if you'd still be the same when I saw you again." "And what do you think now?" he asked. Her eyes searched his. "You haven't changed. You still fight like everything matters." "It does," he said. "You do." The locked weapons trembled between them, and then she pushed back hard, breaking the hold. But there was no anger in her movements now, just determination. The sun had started to sink, casting long shadows across the arena floor. The final horn sounded to signal the last exchange of the match. They both stood still for a moment, breathing, watching each other. Then Kyra moved, fast as lightning. Ethan met her halfway. The last clash was a storm of motion, strikes, blocks, feints, counters. Neither of them gave an inch, and then it was over. They stepped back, weapons lowered, breathing hard. The crowd's roar was deafening, but Ethan barely heard it. He was watching her face, searching for what came next. Kyra's expression was unreadable, but there was no distance in her eyes anymore. She looked at him like someone who had found what they were searching for. Not bad. "For a human," she said with the faintest smile. And for the first time since she had left, Ethan felt that maybe, just maybe, the space between them was starting to close. The air in the arena was heavy with heat and noise. Ethan's chest rose and fell with deep, steady breaths. Kyra stood across from him, her spear tip lowered, her eyes locked on his. Around them, the crowd roared for the final exchanges. The last few minutes of the duel had been unlike anything Ethan expected. She had pushed him harder than anyone had before, yet there had been moments, brief, unguarded moments, when the wall between them seemed to crack. He had seen a flicker of the Kyra he had once known, the one who laughed at his Earth stories and asked endless questions about oceans, forests, and the stars. Now, with the match nearly over, Ethan wanted to hold on to that flicker and make it grow. The horn blared for the next round. Kara stepped forward, her spear moving in a smooth arc. Ethan braced himself. But before her weapon could connect, the arena suddenly plunged into darkness. The crowd gasped. The copper light of Zareth's. Twin suns vanished behind a sudden blackout, not just in the arena, but across the entire sky. A strange silence replaced the roar of voices. Only the faint hum of the emergency lights remained, casting dim red glows along the walls. Kyra froze, her head turning sharply toward the stands. "This isn't part of the match," she said under her breath. Ethan looked around. The shadows were deep now, swallowing most of the arena floor. Shapes moved in the darkness, not all of them friendly. A voice boomed from somewhere high above. Power systems compromised. Possible attack detected. The crowd erupted into panic. Kura tightened her grip on her spear. "Stay close, human." For a moment, the duel didn't matter. This was something bigger and dangerous. But to Ethan, it also meant something else. In this chaos, there was no audience, no rules, no protocol keeping them apart. This was a chance to stand beside her, not as an opponent, but as an ally. And that was exactly what he intended to do. Figures emerged from the far side of the arena, not Zareth guards, but strangers in dark armor, their weapons glowing faintly. In the dim light, they moved fast, vaulting over the outer walls and into the crowd's edge. Kyra's eyes narrowed. Raiders. Ethan's instincts kicked in. Then let's move. They fell into motion together, side by side. The arena floor that had been their battlefield moments ago was now a place they had to defend. Kyra's spear flashed, taking down the first attacker with precision. Ethan followed, using his short blade to intercept another raider aiming for her back. The fight in the dark was nothing like the duel. Here, every sound mattered. Every shadow could hide danger. And yet, Ethan felt something familiar, the rhythm of working together. Months ago, during the early days of their friendship, they had trained together in a neutral station's gym. She had always said humans fought like water, flowing around obstacles instead of crashing straight through them. Now, in the chaos, she could see that again. "You never stop moving," she said between strikes. "Not when someone I care about is in trouble," Ethan replied. She didn't answer, but he saw the way her jaw tightened, the way she registered. The words, they fought through the confusion, pushing back against the raiders until the remaining ones retreated into the shadows. The emergency lights flickered again, signaling that power was returning. Slowly, the copper sunlight began to seep back into the arena. The crowd, shaken but safe, began to cheer again. Not for the duel, but for the defense they had just witnessed. Kira stepped back, lowering her spear. Her breathing was steady, but her gaze was fixed on Ethan in a way that felt different now. "You didn't have to fight with me?" she said quietly. "Yes, I did," he replied. "Distance doesn't change that." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The suns bathed the arena in light again, and the officials began clearing the intruders' remains. The duel was set to continue, but something fundamental had shifted. Before, they had been two opponents testing each other. Now, they were allies who had faced real danger together. Ethan realized something. This was his moment to show her what humans were really made of. Not just in battle, but in loyalty. In holding on to someone even when the universe made it hard. The horn sounded again, calling them back to the copper suns had fully returned, washing the arena in gold and bronze light. The crowd was still buzzing from the sudden raid, and the way Ethan and Kyra had stood together to drive the attackers out. But now, their voices rose for something else, the continuation of the duel. Ethan stood across from her, breathing steadily, though every muscle in his body ached. His short blade felt heavier than it had before, but his grip was firm. Kyra rolled her shoulders, the sunlight glinting off her armor. The raiders are gone. No more interruptions. Good, Ethan said. Let's finish this. Her lips curved in a faint smile. You fought well, human. But now you will face me without restraint. He knew what that meant. Until now, she had been testing him, holding back. But this final round would be her true speed, her true power. The part of her that had earned the title of undefeated champion of Zareth. The horn blared, and Kyra exploded forward. She was faster than before, so fast the spear was a blur. Ethan barely blocked the first strike, then ducked the second. But the third came at his side, so quickly he felt the rush of air against his ribs. His legs strained to keep up as she pressed forward. He couldn't overpower her. That had never been his way. Instead, he focused on what had gotten him this far. Adapt, survive, endure. The crowd gasped as he slid under a sweeping strike, rolled to his feet, and pivoted to face her again. Kira was already on him, the spear darting like lightning. He blocked one thrust with the flat of his blade, only to have her twist the weapon and slam the shaft against his shield arm. Numbing it, pain flared, but Ethan gritted his teeth and moved in close again. He tapped the edge of her armor with his blade, a light strike, but enough to score another point by their rules. The crowd erupted. No one scored against Kira at full power. No one. Her eyes narrowed, but there was no anger there. Only respect. You never stop. Not when something matters, Ethan said. Panting, her spear spun again, and this time the blows came heavier. One strike jarred his blade loose. Another clipped his shoulder. He stumbled, and the crowd roared, sensing the end. Kira could have ended it right there. Instead, she paused for a split second. Stand, human. Show me what you really are. Ethan pushed himself upright. He didn't feel strong anymore, not physically, but something deeper kept him steady. Months of wondering if she remembered him. Months of wanting to reach across the distance, and not knowing how. Now, here, he had found the answer. Not words, not letters, actions. He raised his blade again. The next moments were a blur. She came at him, and he matched her step for step, block for block, strike for strike. Not with equal strength, but with something else, a refusal to break. He ducked under her spear and stepped inside her guard again, placing his hand against the center of her armor. Got you, he said quietly. Her eyes widened, just slightly. Then she smiled. A true smile this time, unguarded. The horn sounded. The final round was over. The arena erupted into noise. The crowd split between disbelief and celebration. Ethan lowered his blade, chest heaving, and met her gaze. Kyra stepped forward, standing so close that the noise of the crowd faded. No one has ever pushed me like that, she said. Ethan's voice was low, but steady. I wasn't just fighting to win. I was fighting to close the distance between us. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in full view of the crowd, she extended her hand. By the rules of Zareth, you are my equal. By my challenge, you are my husband. The crowd roared again, but Ethan barely heard them. He saw only her face and the faint, familiar warmth in her eyes. The months of silence were still there, but now they felt different. Like something that could be mended. Like a road that could be walked together. And as the sun shone down on the arena, Ethan knew that, for the first time since she had moved away, they weren't distant anymore. The arena was almost empty now. The chants and cheers had faded, replaced by the faint sound of cleaning crews and distant merchants packing up their stalls. The copper suns were dipping toward the horizon, painting the stone walls in soft orange. Ethan sat on a bench near the training yard, holding a small flask of water. His muscles ached from head to toe, but he felt lighter than he had in months. Footsteps approached. He didn't need to look to know it was her. Kyra stopped a few feet away. She was out of her armor, now wearing a simple tunic and trousers. Without the battle gear, she looked less like the untouchable champion of Zareth and more like the Kira he remembered, the one who had once sat beside him under the shade of desert cliffs, laughing about nothing at all. "You fought well," she said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "You fought better." They stood there in silence for a moment, the air thick with things left unsaid. Finally, Kyra sat down beside him. "You probably have questions," she said. "Only one," he replied. "Why did you leave without saying goodbye?" Her gaze stayed on the ground. "I didn't want to, but I had no choice. My homeworld needed me. My family, they're part of the warrior guild. When the summons came, I had to go immediately. There was no time for letters, no time for anything." Ethan took a slow breath. "And after that, months passed. I thought maybe you didn't want to talk anymore." She turned to look at him then, and there was no armor in her eyes, only regret. "I wanted to, but here, life is not like on Earth. Communication is watched. Every message is read by the guild. I didn't want to risk saying something that could get you involved in my battles." It made sense now, the silence, the distance. It wasn't indifference. It was protection. Still, he shook his head. "You could have told me that. I would have understood." "I know," she said, voice low. "But I didn't trust myself. If I spoke to you, I might not have been able to stop." They sat in silence again, but it wasn't the heavy, aching silence from before. This one felt like a bridge, fragile, but real. "You know," Ethan said, "when I came here, I didn't know what I was going to say to you. I thought maybe you'd tell me to go home. Maybe you'd already forgotten me." "I could never forget you," Kyra said firmly. "When I heard you had entered the tournament, I thought it was a mistake. But when you stood in that arena today, and when you faced me without fear, I remembered exactly why I—" She stopped herself, looking away. Ethan waited. He didn't push. "Why I challenged you," she finished quietly. He gave a small laugh. "So, the marriage thing, was that just part of the game?" Her eyes met his. "No. On Zareth, a challenge like that is serious. You proved yourself today. Not just as a warrior, as someone who won't give up. Someone who will cross worlds if he has to. That's just human nature," Ethan said. "We hold on to the people we care about, even if the distance feels impossible." They didn't speak for a while after that. The sun sank lower, and the air cooled. Finally, Kyra stood and offered her hand. "Come, the guild will want to meet." "You? And there's someone I want you to see." Ethan hesitated. "Who?" She smiled, faintly. "My family." It was a small thing, but it felt like the beginning of something new, something stronger than the months of silence. As they walked side by side through the streets, Ethan felt the weight he had carried for so long start to fade. The distance between them wasn't gone, not completely. But now he knew how to cross it. Humans, he thought, have a strange kind of hope, the kind that survives absence, silence, and even pain. The kind that keeps walking forward, no matter how far away the other side is. And in that moment, under the alien sky, he was certain of one thing. This wasn't the end of their story. It was just the start of a road they would walk together.